interesting factor that a lot of students don't consider when they're reading passages for MCAT cars is that MCAT cars actually has a speed limit, and AAMC really does want you to hit it. Here's how this works. So, from our analysis and work with thousands of students and our analysis of performance of high performance test takers that are in the 90th percentile and above, we have a pretty good idea on how long a passage generally takes. In cars, as per the MCAT behavior standard, we generally assign a time of 4 minutes and 30 seconds for reading a passage completely. Now, this might seem a little odd, but there's a lot of reasons that go into this time, including a lot of data, so we're just going to use this. Typically, it's a plus minus 30 seconds. Harder passages might take a little bit longer, and easier passages might take a little bit less time. This is a really good number to use for the vast majority of students. And the interesting thing is, even if you look at the timestamps of individuals that are in the 90th percentile and above, so let's say generally the 128 to 132 range, we actually find that their timestamps hover in a similar range, typically anywhere from 3 minutes to 4 minutes. So this might seem a little bit odd, but basically what this says is that even at the highest level of cars test taking ability, high scorers are still taking a good amount of time to read the passage. The main takeaway from this fact is that if you're reading the passage in less time than the highest scorers and you aren't scoring as highly, that's probably a big part of your problem. Now, here's where students get into trouble, because reading speed and passage comprehension are very closely related. In our analysis, what we typically found is that as reading speed increases, passage comprehension usually goes down. And here's where we have to strike that balance, right? We need to be fast on the MCAT. It's a timed exam. We can't just take forever to read each passage. At the same time, if our passage comprehension isn't good, when we go to do the questions, we're going to struggle a lot because we don't remember or recall the details in sufficient enough detailed comprehension to fully answer the advanced questions we're going to get asked. So we really have to strike a very fine balance as a student, and typically this is our speed limit. 4 minutes and 30 to read the passage completely is often a really, really good time that sets up students for long-term success. Of course, that always comes with good foundational reading skills, like the ones we discuss in Module 1 of our CARS course, which goes through the fundamentals of reading a passage and how to interpret it. But let's take a look at what happens when your reading speed is a little too high. Well, let's say you have a student A. Student A just reads really fast and took 2 minutes to read the passage, but their passage comprehension isn't that great at that speed because, like we said, even the highest scorers need at least typically 3 minutes to read even the easiest passage. Now, with that in mind, when student A reaches the questions, unfortunately, they're going to reread a lot of the passage. And of course, rereading is a very important part of answering CARS questions for many CARS questions, but excessive rereading destroys your time. And it's that time destruction that's really, really dangerous, because although you took 2 minutes to read the passage and you have a good amount of time left over, if you have to reread significant parts of the passage for every single question, you're going to bleed all of that time away. And on top of that, your understanding of the passage isn't going to be sufficient enough to really tackle the questions in a meaningful manner. The problem here as well is that when you reread a lot, students often tend to get really anxious just because you feel like the passage and the questions are a lot harder, or you feel like you're just not doing a good job and you get scared in CARS, and that's when the anxiety starts to build. As the anxiety starts to build, what happens is that students actually start to read faster or slower, but typically they tend to read faster. Very few students often get anxious and start reading slower. The vast majority often end up speeding up even more. But the issue is, when they speed up more, their comprehension actually goes down. So on top of comprehension, their accuracy in questions also goes down because they make simple mistakes and errors that they typically wouldn't have if they weren't so anxious. So unfortunately, MCAT CARS has a pretty set pace. By managing your timing skills appropriately and combining them with really well-founded foundational skills for reading and analyzing passages, you can avoid all of this. Because let's say you're student B and you read the passage in 4 minutes 30, you're going to do a lot less of this. It's not going to be completely gone, but it's only going to be as necessary to answer questions. You're going to have reduced anxiety, you're going to end up reading slower, and then your comprehension, instead of going down, is going to go up, and your accuracy is going to go up. So, the main takeaway we want students to get from this is that going faster in CARS is not always the answer. And in many cases, well, we would say the massive majority of cases, the faster students read a passage, the worse they are in the long run because their comprehension really suffers, which basically leads to this enormous feedback loop, which just ruins their scores. Remember, if you want to get good at CARS, work on the foundational skills for reading in a skilled and efficient manner to maximize passage understanding within a certain time limit that balances the need for speed and efficiency with comprehension. We think students should definitely take this approach into consideration, and the way we do it at MCAT Savior is typically with a balance of skills called vocalization and mouse tracking. You can get those lessons for free as part of our Module 0 strategy set. They are lessons that basically just teach students how to go through a passage in a systematic manner to the point where they can read any 600-word passage within the 4 minutes 30 time limit without an issue. So we definitely hope this helped and gave you some skills to take on the AAMC. Alright, that was a complicated lesson. If you still need help, check out our full-length blog post that we linked in the video description, explore more of our YouTube channel, or just head on over to mcatsavior.com where you can get all of our strategy courses for free.